Hi, folks. Welcome. It's wonderful to look out here to see all these beautiful, wonderful, friendly faces. It feels like family, you know. I'm going to sing a song for you that I used to think was a kid's song, but I've learned differently. Oh, ho, ho. The buzzing of the bees and the cigarette trees, the soda water fountain where the lemonade springs and the bluebird sings in that big rock candy mountain. On a summer's day in the month of May, a burly bum come a-hiking down the shady lane through the sugar cane. He was looking for his liking. As he strolled along, he sang a song about a land of milk and honey, where a bum can stay for many a day, and he won't need any money. Oh, ho, ho. The buzzing of the bees and the cigarette trees, the soda water fountain where the lemonade springs and the bluebird sings in that big rock candy mountain. In that big rock candy mountain, the cops have wooden legs. The bulldogs all have rubber teeth, and the hens lay soft-boiled eggs. The farmers' trees are full of fruit, the barns are full of hay. Well, I want to go where there ain't no snow, where the rain don't fall and the wind don't blow, in that big rock candy mountain. Oh, ho, ho. The buzzing of the bees and the cigarette trees, the soda water fountain where the lemonade springs and the bluebird sings in that big rock candy mountain. Thank you. One's for sorrow, two's for joy, three's for a girl and four's for a boy, five's for silver, six for gold, seven's for a secret never told. Devil, devil, I defy thee. Devil, devil, I defy thee. Devil, devil, I defy thee. Oh, the magpie brings us tidings of news both fair and foul. She's more cunning than the raven, wise as any owl. She brings us news of the harvest of barley, wheat, and corn, and she knows when we'll go to our graves and how we should be born. One's for sorrow, two's for joy, three's for a girl and four's for a boy, five's for silver, six for gold, seven's for a secret never told. Devil, devil, I defy thee. Devil, devil, I defy thee. Devil, devil, I defy thee. She brings us joy when from the right, grief when from the left. Of all the news that's in the air, we know to trust her best. She sees us at our labor, mocks us at our work, and she steals the eggs from out of the nest. She can mop the hawk 1's for sorrow, 2's for joy, 3's for a girl and 4's for a boy, 5's for silver, 6 for gold, 7's for a secret never told. Devil, devil, I defy thee, devil, devil, I defy thee, devil, devil, I defy thee. The priest, he says we're wicked to worship the devil's bird. Ah, but we prefer the old ways, disregard his word. For we know that they rest uneasy while we slumber in the night, and we always leave out a little bit of meat for the bird that's black and white. 1's for sorrow, 2's for joy, 3's for a girl, and 4's for a boy, 5's for silver, 6 for gold, 7's for a secret never told.
Hog killing, Christmas time come and went. Almarine bided his time. It was coming spring when he set off again over Snowman Mountain. It was a cold, cold day with a bright, pale sun. Ground still froze.
Almarine stepped along right smartly. He had his gun, he had his dog, and he had him some new boots that he'd bought off of a man in Black Rock. Them boots crunches down on the moss, still froze. But some of the birds was back, he saw, and the red bud was fixing to show. Almarine walked along the trace, whistling.
And then all of a sudden he stopped. He couldn't have said why he stopped, whistling, nor what passed over the day.
Well, it was like it all grew brighter, that kind of a shining day you get sometimes at the tail end of winter.
All of a sudden a redbird flew up right in front of his face.
Oh, redbird.
Seeing a redbird gives you a wish. As for whether he got it or not, I'm never the one to say.
Oh, redbird? For the redbird had never flew away.
In fact, it hopped right along the trace ahead of Almarine's new black boots.
Sick him, Duck, Almarine said to his dog, but Duck never moved a foot. Duck cocked his head at that redbird and whined, and his hair rose up all along his back. Seeing this made Almarine grab his rifle, hold it closer, look all around the mountain.
Now, Almarine was on the wild side of the mountain. Nobody much lives over there. There's a stretch of the trace goes down. It runs over rocky ground and these big old white rocks strewed off down the side of the mountain. This is the stretch he was passing through.
And the rocks is funny here. Some of them so big like and laying in funny forms, like they's thrown out against the side of the mountain. You can't see how they got to where they are. There's no rocks like it any place else on these 3 mountains.
The little redbird is singing to beat the band, and Almarine stares all around.
Duck is growling and backing up with every hair on his back standing right straight up.
The sun shines white off in all those rocks, so they take on a diamond glow and shine in that bright, cold sun. Air itself is so fresh and cold, it's like it beats on your face almost. It's like you can't get no breath.
And Almarine feels all lightheaded. He sees these bright white shapes. It looks a lot like snowflakes in front of his eyes. Only there ain't no snowflakes.
This is when Duck commences to growling, then to barking, and then takes off lickety-split back over the trace.
I'll be damned.
This little redbird is now still a-hopping along the ground, Almarine kind of following.
This little redbird sings the prettiest song that a body ever heard. The little song is so sweet and so sad it brings tears into Almarine's eyes, or it might be it's only cold. But it makes a pull on Almarine's heart. He knows he is going to follow it whether or no.
The little bird flies up in the crook of a tree.
Almarine follows it off in a trace without even considering what he's about or where it might lead him.
He don't have a choice in the world. There goes that redbird, and there goes Almarine.
He's sure fire surprised to see how a trail opens up where there never was one before. and how his boots travel right along it.
So Almarine goes off down Snowman Mountain, a-follerin' the redbird with the day all shiny around him.
Little freshets of waters busting out on the rocks all around the way they do in the spring of the year. Every year this happens along about this time of the thaw. Waterfalls springing up where there wasn't no water before and running down along down to the creeks. This water is the coldest and the best you ever put in your mouth because it comes from the driven snow.
Almarine stops where a freshet has bubbled into a rocky pocket in one of them rocks, takes him a long, cold drink.
It wasn't like water at all. It was like liquor. The way it runs straight to his heart and the way it made his hands and his feet set to tingling.
Almarine is feeling lightheaded now. He's starting to grin. On he goes, down he goes, on the path between them big white rocks with the redbird a-leading the way. He stops one time and looks all around just to get his bearings.
But he don't know from no place where he is. The rocks above and below's a shining so white in that so bright sun, and the water coming down off of them is a shining so. The sky above is a deep, fine blue without no cloud inside.
Right by his boot is a little yellow flower that Almarine has not seen the likes of before in all his years running these mountains. So Almarine leans over and picks it.
This is a pretty little flower, what resembles a rose. It has sprung straight up from the rocky ground on a pale green stalk without nary a leaf. Almarine studies the flower a while, and then that red bird starts up again all of a sudden. And he quits studying it and looks around, looks ahead down the mountain.
What Almarine sees puts a stamp on the rest of his life.
The streams had all flowed into a pool, which was set in a little circle of rocks at the bottom of the mountain. This was a deep pool, too, plumb full of that crystal clear water, so you know how cold it was. And a woman was kneeling before it, washing herself.
Almarine come upon her from the back. She was way down on her knees, leaning forward, dipping up the water in her hands. She was naked from the waist up. Her black skirt was pulled down around her hips, her shirtwaist throwed on the ground. Skin of her back showed the whitest white Almarine had ever seen, and her hair fell all down her back to her waist.
And that hair, Lord, it was a reddest red, a red so dark it's not a purple. Red, like the leaves on the dogwood tree in the fall. And that red bird perched on a rock to the side of the pool. And directly he started to sing.
The woman whirled around. She stood. Now, everything that happened real fast, of course.
But for Almarine, it was like it was taking 100 years. She seemed to turn so slow, and her hair whirled out slow as she turned, like a red rain of water around her head. In his mind, he would see her again and again. The way she stood up so slow, how she turned.
Get out in here, she said. But she made no move to cover her glory.
Almarine looked his fill.
She was a woman as big as he was, near about 6 feet tall. Her eyes black as night and her nose long and thin. Her mouth was as red as a cut on her face, and the color flamed in her cheeks. It was a long face, bony.
But Almarine thought she was beautiful.
Her hair hung all down her back, and her breasts were big and white, with her nipples springing out on them white and red like blood.
My name is Almarine Cantrell, and I plan to take you home.
When he said that, it was like a shadow crossed her face. She looked like all the sadness in the world was in her heart. She knowed it couldn't happen is why. Because this was old man Isom's red-headed Emmy, who could never have a mortal man in all her days. She belonged to the devil. Her daddy had done pledged her years before. But, she had never seen a man like Almarine. It was like she knowed for the first time just what it was she couldn't have. She looked at Almarine a long time, while all around them it was bright and still there on Snowman Mountain.
Now, Almarine didn't know none of that about Red Emmy being a witch. All Almarine knowed was that he had followed a path, come up on a woman he had to have, and there she was, standing well nigh naked before him in the middle of the morning. And she didn't try to cover herself neither. And that look on her face gone straight to his heart. For there never was a young man yet who won't go out and right a wrong or kill a man or have to do something to earn his right to what is there for the taking. Only he don't think he can ask nor take without earning it.
Red Emmy throws back her head. A darkness comes into her eyes. Still looking hard at Almarine, she stoops over, quick and graceful, her breasts a-swinging, and picks up her shirtwaist off in the rocks. Would you kindly turn your head for a minute?
Almarine looks off to the side.
She's gone when he looks back.
Almarine screams like a painter and plunges ahead down the trail to that little pool. He runs off in the woods to the left and then again to the right, hollering. He can't find this red-headed woman again, nor has she left any sign.
She's gone as quick as ever she come, like fire smoke up into thin air.
Almarine sits on a rock and cries. And then he stands up and swears to find her. He fires his gun off once straight up in the air. It echoes off all them rocks. Almarine puts that little yaller flower in his pocket, starts for home.
He has forgot everything he ever knowed near about, except for that red-headed Emmy. Almarine come over to ask me about her, but I daren't tell him a thing. I was churning the time he come. You better go back over to Black Rock, I says. Find you a sweet, God-fearing town girl.
My mind's set. You could help me if you would, old granny.
I will not. I don't know a thing.
Well, I'll find her whether you help me or not. I don't give a damn for your notions. And then he turned on his heel, left.
I watched him walking off down my holler, swinging his arms, whistling. Young man like that, he don't have every idea what he's fooling with, nor afeard of a thing. I went back to my churn, but the better never come that day. I can't say 'twere any surprise I was lying through my teeth to Almarine, and butter don't come on a lie. A mountain man, old man Isom was. He used to come down to Joe Johnson's store with them bags of ginseng, trade for supplies, and then hightail it back up on Snowman Mountain. Then he started sending that Red Emmy. Didn't nobody know how he got that gal. Some says he had him a wife and he killed her, and others says he just dreamt Emmy up out of the black air by the Raven Cliffs. But old Isom got him a girl some way, and then he pledged her to the devil. She growed up with ravens in caves. She was a fair sight older than Almarine, too. 40 years, Red Emmy. She must have been when Almarine happened upon her. But a witch don't show age like a regular gal. Her body is too full of blood.
Almarine searched all over Snowman Mountain. He tried to find that path again, leading down from the old white rocks, that path, and the little pool. But it's like it plumb disappeared. Try as he would, Almarine never could find it again. Nor could he spot the little red bird, nor find that little yaller flower he thought he put so careful in his pocket. It's like it's all in his mind.
If it was or if it wasn't, I'll say this. If a body searches for something so long, he's bound to find something.
And soon, he come upon her. There by her daddy's cave, cooking out over a fire. It was fixing to get dark that evening, and the smoke swirled all around.
Almarine stood right there and viewed her through the smoke.
How are you called? Then he started walking toward the fire.
She looked at him through that smoke like she didn't want to speak, and then at last she said, "Emmy, you better get on away from here." But then her daddy come a-running all wild-haired out in the cave, knocked her to the ground and fired a pistol at Almarine's head.
But Almarine didn't have no gun at the time, so he was forced to leave. The ravens was squealing, calling out in the night. It was like they was laughing him home. Almarine grit his teeth, and he swore that he would kill her pa.
But he never had to. Old Isom just up and died. Or that is how Red Emmy gave it out. But you know in your heart she killed him. Killed him for Almarine. Old Isom fell off a rocky cliff and died, and the ravens ate out his eyes.
But nobody knows if Isom's death were a natural death or not. Him a falling off on a rocky cliff he'd lived on for all of his life.
Red Emmy buried him herself. Then she packed all she owned in a poke, set out a-walking in the light of the moon for Hoot Owl Holler. It was right at midnight when she come, Almarine asleep beside the fire. Duck stood out in the yard a-howling, but she spoke a word and it hushed him. Red Emmy pushed open the door with her foot, walked in the front room, laid her poke in the corner. Then she walked over and looked down at Almarine where he laid in heavy sleep, his light hair splayed out on the pillar. Lord! What would have went on in Red Emmy's head, knowing she could never be no man's wife? She knowed how her daddy had raised her. She knowed, too, what her own needs was and how she had to fill them. But just right then, when Emmy looked down at Almarine sleeping, it was like she was the one bewitched. "Almarine Cantrell," she said.
Almarine sat bolt upright, rubbed his eyes. At first he thought 'twas a dream, coming to his own house on the Hoot Owl Holler. She stood as tall and straight as an Indian, with her head wrapped up in a big dark shawl. "Take that off," he says. And he watched while
Emmy reached up and unwound the shawl and then pulled pins all out in her long red hair. "Now, do you know me?" she said.
and Almarine nodded his head. Oh, give to me a winding stream, must not be too wide, where waving leaves from maple trees do meet from either side. The water must be deep enough to float a small canoe, with no one dear but you. Do not disturb this waking dream, the splendor of that winding stream. Flower in my canoe, her eyes they look me through. A maiden fair with golden hair is very much like you. The sparkling trout beneath the bank does leave his hiding place. Kingfisher from the bough above, so eager to give chase. The spreading branches overhead, the sunrise peeping through, when looking dear at you. Do not disturb the splendor of this winding stream. Flower in my canoe, her eyes they look me through. A maiden fair with golden hair is very much like you.
Miss Iona walked to work each morning and back again in the afternoon, not deviating by so much as a block from her chosen route, the accustomed way she had come and gone for 40 years. Sleepy salesgirls stood in their doors to see her pass by, head high, sailing through the morning. The small, sensible black shoes angled slightly outward from her tiny ankles and were laid precisely upon the sidewalk with rapid, mincing steps. Miss Iona clutched her purse squarely before her with white-gloved hands, and she held it before her slightly, as if she planned to present it to the next passerby. Miss Iona's features were small and wrinkled, perfectly regular, which proved even now that she had been a beauty in her time. She had not modified her hairstyle since adopting it for life in 1934. This hairstyle had now come into its own again and appeared oddly fashionable, as if cut out of a recent magazine and pasted around the aging doll-like face. She looked like an antique figurine on ball bearings, wound up and set loose upon the modern streets. Her house stood at the corner, that Greek Revival house with 6 columns and a frieze above the columns featuring all the signs of the zodiac. Miss Iona liked to announce, "I am a Scorpio, a creature of earth and fire." Miss Iona walked to work in every weather. She did not have to work, but she wanted to. It was her vocation. She passed the block of doctor's offices and small stores. In the center of the block was a store specializing in prosthetic devices. Miss Iona never glanced into its window, and she never would. Prosthetic devices were vulgar. She passed the bank and the hardware store, and then she reached the tiny messenger newspaper office. She climbed the steps to the office and sat behind her father's old desk. Miss Iona nibbled delicately at a candied orange peel and mused upon her destiny. She saw herself as the custodian of beauty and truth in the town of Speed, the champion of the pure and good. As society editor of the Weekly Messenger, she controlled the public life of Speed. She announced the births of babies in her column. She wrote the obituaries, took care of weddings and anniversaries and club meetings. Well, what was the good of having a party if Miss Iona didn't write it up? You might as well not have bothered. What was the good of wearing a silver lame dress if Miss Iona wrote you up in beige lace? The truth is what you read in the paper. Sometimes Miss Iona was incomprehensible. Once she put Grecian urns of bougainvillea in every home and at every wedding for months on end. Sometimes she draped everyone in mink, regardless of the season. In the women's pages of the newspaper, everything was elegant. Brides came down the aisle arrayed in beauty and grace and light, and sometimes their dresses weren't mentioned at all. So if you wanted to read the paper and review the whole thing in your mind's eye, you had a hard time with nothing but beauty and grace and light to go on. Some people didn't like the way Miss Iona did obituaries, but there were others who thought they were beautiful. The obituaries never read, "So-and-so is survived by." No, they read, "Let us leave in sorrow to mourn the passing of our beloved. Miss Iona was exactly as old as the paper. She had become ladies' editor when her father was the publisher, and she was a young girl. Now there was this new editor, this progressive young man who was active in all the civic doings of the town. His name was Manly Neighbors, and it was a surprise to Olive Speed that he kept her on. But Manly Neighbors had been taught to respect his elders, so he kept her on. Often he didn't even attempt to edit her copy. He wrote his pages, she wrote hers, and that was that. The messenger staff included the secretary, the photographer, a man who came in to write up the high school games, 2 people who handled advertising, and a legion of menials who were concerned with the physical aspects of printing the paper. Miss Iona held herself quite aloof from menials and physical aspects. Manly was decent, but he was progressive. He hoped Miss Iona would die or retire soon, but he never voiced those thoughts. Speed was changing, and Manly couldn't ignore the changes. Rows of little brick houses popped up where the pecan groves had been. The Greeley mansion had been turned into a library. A big neon Pepsi sign threw its red light down onto the marble Confederate major in the square's center. Everywhere you looked, you saw them, the signs of the times. Through the open window before her father's desk, Miss Iona watched the happily flashing Pepsi sign, and beside it the little old-fashioned Sunbeam girl, continuously eating fat slices of shining neon bread. It was all inexpressibly vulgar to Miss Iona, who nevertheless felt that this sordid view, the Sunbeam girl and the giant bottled cola, served a mission for which they were never intended. They did not make her crave Pepsis and tuna fish sandwiches. On the contrary, they made her abhor these things and cleave ever more strongly to her ideals. They reinforced her vocation. Miss Iona gazed out her window and was strengthened by the sight. It is somewhat like the flight of the phoenix, she realized. She did not like the note on her desk from Manly. It said, "Get pics, feature on local winners of the state majorette contest to be held tomorrow in Tuscaloosa. Local winner will lead all Sesqui parades. Yours, M.N." Yours. As if she would have Manly Neighbors even if somebody gave him to her on a platter. And the way he always wrote Sesqui instead of sesquicentennial, not even allowing our great celebration the full measure of dignity with which the sheer historical weight of the years should endow it. I must calm myself. Faint heart ne'er won fair lady. Miss Iona walked over to the window and looked down upon the square, upon all the ignorant, hurrying people in the square. My mission is to instruct. Arriba! She looked again at the note from Manly. I will never put a majorette on the society page. There never has been one, and there never will be one, not as long as I am alive. Miss Iona shuddered to think of majorettes. They were horrid. She had seen them on television, and she knew. The only girls worse than majorettes were the girls of the roller derby. Miss Iona went back to her desk and opened the bottom drawer and pulled out a volume of poetry. The bottom drawer was filled with books of poetry, and Miss Iona often turned to them for inspiration in dark hours. She liked Tennyson, Milton, Byron. She began to read, but then put her book down abruptly as Manly neighbors entered. "Morning, Miss Iona." Manly was a strapping fellow, husky, friendly, with the look of a former high school football player gone gloriously to seed. Manly always had a tan, and Miss Iona suspected that he played many little outdoor games with his friends. Miss Iona could just hear him shouting sporty epithets to his friends in the heat of play, and she could just see him perspiring. She was sure he perspired. "Find my note?" Manly asked. "Oh, yes. But I must say, I think we can do without a majorette on the society page. I never heard of such a thing." "Well, then, write her up for general news. I'll stick her in on page 2, but I want her in there. Everything that has to do with the sesquicentennial is getting a big play. It's good for business, you know." "I think we could do without her." "I reckon. But I want everything about the sesquicentennial covered right from the start." "And a pretty girl never hurt the paper sale anyway. I just might even put her on page 1 if she's really something." "Mr. Neighbors, this is not Playboy." "Of course not, Miss Flowers. Yeah, I'd like that feature by tomorrow. I'll take the Sesquist story cover story now if you've got it ready. I'd like to get page 1 laid out by noon." Manly went into the other room and closed the door behind him. "Well, some of us have principles at least." The overhead fan whirled gently, caressing the pages of the sesquicentennial story as she read through it again, checking for errors. 150 years ago, our forefathers founded Speed, the pastoral settlement on the banks of the great Mongawata River. Today, we celebrate our roots. The group of leading citizens has planned a great sesquicentennial celebration to commemorate our humble beginnings and celebrate our promising future. Speed's own sesquicentennial producer-director, Mr. Buck Fire, will arrive shortly to commence auditions, casting, and rehearsals for the spectacular outdoor pageant, The Song of Speed. An actor professionally, Mr. Buck Fire has appeared in motion pictures the world over, as well as on television in an episode of My Three Sons. He will bring a wealth of wide experience to his task. A cast of over 250 local actors and actresses will sing the Song of Speed, exploring the wealth of history, industry, and raw materials at our disposal. The lucky, lovely maiden chosen to rule as sesquicentennial queen will be presented at each performance. The tentative schedule for this glorious week will include the parade, opening ceremonies, first annual pilgrimage of the Speed Historical Society, in which gracious hostesses will open their homes, venting their traditional Southern hospitality upon the general public. The sesquicentennial ball, a return to more gracious days. Burial of the Speed time capsule containing relics of modern Speed. Judging of the beard contest. Any man, woman, or child wishing to participate in this celebration should get in touch with the sesquicentennial headquarters. Interested ladies will join the Bells group. while the men will sport full beards, mustachios, and be designated as the Bushy Brothers. Sesquicentennial week is but 8 short weeks hence. Let them be eventful ones of zestful preparation. Miss Iona delicately licked the end of her ballpoint pen. It was a fine story. Manly Neighbors had no sense of theater, of the dramatic element so necessary to good journalism. It was a high art, akin to that of tightrope walking. One balanced an adverb here, an adjective there, and progressed along the central strand of the story. All Manly understands is facts and dollar bills. Manly has no flair. Miss Iona shut her eyes and imagined the pageant. She saw a set somewhat like Midsummer Night's Dream, only southern, with Spanish moss dangling all about. She saw noble Indians come and go, gentle Negroes singing their spiritual songs, crinoline ladies curtsying to gallant officers in gray. She heard a bugle, the call to war. Have you got that Sesqui story, please, ma'am? It was Manly Neighbors. I'm fixing to lay out the page. So you are. She handed him the typewritten pages. Manly Neighbors turned and left her office, thanking her, but Miss Iona stared at his back with distaste. Demonstrating anew his singular lack of flair, Manly had untied his tie. Its loose ends flapped at his elbows as he hurried to his desk. From behind, it looked to Miss Iona as if his elbows had sprouted obscene little tails.
I take with me where I go a pen and a golden bowl. Poet and beggar step in my shoes, or a prince in a purple shawl. I bring with me when I return to the house that my father's hands made. A crooning bird on a golden bough, and oh, a sad, sad word.
It is snowing now. Daddy, my sweet daddy, sleeps by the light of the fire. He won't hardly wake up for a thing. The snow's drifting plumb up the roof. If you go to get water from the spring, you've got to bust the ice. We've not got but one pair of gloves amongst us. Yesterday when I was hauling water, I slipped and fell coming down the hill and spilled my whole bucket full. I just laid there with night coming on. I could feel my tears freezing on my face. I wanted nothing more than to lay there. That blue air seemed so pure and sweet. I could hear the wind go whoosh real gentle through the cedar trees. And then Mama hollered out, "Where was I?" So I went back up and got some more water. I would have laid out there forever if I could have. Well, that was yesterday evening. We ate us some sweet taters Mama had roasted and some cornbread Beulah had made. Beulah's cornbread is better than Mama's. So this was good. But then all of a sudden, in comes Ganell and Virgie Klein. Just pushed the door open and pushed those old black bonnets around it. The Kiss sisters comes in laughing like silver bells. And then they sees Daddy, and they goes over and touches him here and there. Their hands fluttering like the butterflies down on Sugar Fork in the spring. He's going, they said. Hola. Ganelle and Virgie are maiden ladies, and their faces are real little and scooched up like apple dolls. Don't nobody knows how they lives. Folks take some food to hear their stories. Well, I think they don't even need food. They just live on their stories. And then my sister Sylvanie said, oh, it must be old Christmas. This is when they used to come every year, January 5th, and sit up all night and drink coffee and tell stories when Daddy was not but a child. You could tell they didn't know if it would be better to stay or go. You could hear our Daddy drawing every breath, and Mama was looking wild. And all I could think of, I swear, was that snow outside where I'd laid so quiet and peaceful. It was like I was being pulled. And then all of a sudden I heard myself say, well, we hope you will stay. Take off your bonnets and come close to the fire and tell us a story. For it seemed like the only way I could keep from running back out in that snow was to hear a story. Well, Mama looked ill as a hornet at me, but then she looked down at Daddy, and then she told Beulah to make some coffee, and the ladies sat down by the fire, and we all gathered up around. Tell old Dry Fry, I said. This is funny, and it's Daddy's favorite. So the sisters passed the story back and forth between them. Well, old Dry Fry was a preacher man. And by and by we was all laughing, even Mama. And then they told a whole bunch more. But then it was late. Me and Sylvanie was the only one still up and listening. Daddy always said old Christmas was a time to stay at home and think on what will last. I looked over there at Daddy fixing to die, and the fire was dying too. Nothing lasts, I thought. Not nary a thing. But then the sisters, who'd been staring to go, sat back and said, well now, Ivy, this one is for you. And they told it then in a whisper so low, it was like it was told in my very own head. There was a man with 3 daughters who was going to fix into town, and he asked, what do you want me to bring you girls? For he loved them very much. The eldest one asked for a new silk dress, the color of every bird in the sky. And the second eldest asked for a new silk dress, the color of every color in the rainbow. And the youngest, who was the father's favorite, she asked for white roses. Well, the onlyest white roses in the whole town was on a rosy bush in the churchyard. And when the father commenced to break these roses, he heard a voice that said, you break them, and I will break you. And then he commenced to break them again, and then he heard it again. And he thought about how his youngest daughter and how bad she wanted them white roses. But finally he heard the voice say, give me what meets you first at your gate, and you can break all you want till your basket is full. And he thought of his old hound dog that always runs out to the gate and said, well, that would be all right. But when he rode up carrying the roses, who should run out but his youngest girl? She said, Daddy, Daddy, get back, Sugar, he hollered. But she come on anyways and give him a big kiss and took the roses. So the father was troubled, but he didn't say nothing. But then, as soon as dark come, they heard a big voice say, send out my pay. So the father tried to send out the old hound dog, but the voice come again, send out my pay. So the father went out there himself, but the voice come again, send out my pay. And finally, the youngest girl She give him a kiss, got in her bonnet, and gone out in the door, where she was surprised to find the biggest white bear she'd ever seen, who said, "Get up on my back." And she done it. But she was crying so hard that her nose bled, and 3 drops of blood fell on the white bear's back. But he kept running on and on. Finally he come to a nice cabin and lit the lamp, and lo and behold, he was a good-looking young feller. And as soon as she seed him, oh, she thought the world of him. But now she had to choose. He said his name was White Bear Whittington, and he had been witched so that he could be a man of a night and a bear of a day, or a bear of a night and a man of a day. Now which would she choose? She picked a man of night. So in the daytime he'd be a bear and lay around in the woods outside while she kept house, and then come night and he'd be a man, and she was as happy as she could be. She loved him with all her heart. She had 3 babies, and time passed, and she wanted to show them to her daddy, for she knew he was getting old. "Well, you can do this," said White Bear Whittington, "but don't you never speak my name, no matter what you do." And she said she never would. So he took him on his back next morning to her father's gate. And her father said, "Oh, now I am so happy to see you, honey." But he kept on asking whose was these babies. And finally, because she loved him so, she said, "White Bear Whittington." Well, Lord, then it lightning and thunder rolled, and when she raised up her eyes, she seed her husband going up Pine Mountain, when on the back of his shirt was 3 drops of blood. Oh, she hollered and cried then, for she loved him. So she left her children with her father and set out after him, and she walked the mountains. And whenever she lost heart, a white bird would fly over and drop a feather with a red speck on it, so she would keep on going. She kept walking for 7 years, and she would have give up if she had not come upon an old woman who gave her 3 gold nuts, a walnut and a hickory nut and a chinky pin, and said for her to follow the river and she would find her man. But what she found was a bunch of women washing his shirt, for whoever could get out the blood could have him. So she grabbed the shirt away from them women, and in a minute it come clean. But then another woman jerked it away, got him and took him home, and all this time he never knowed his wife. He looked straight at her and never knowed her. So the girl gave the woman her gold chinky pin just to sleep with him one night, and she did. And in the night the girl said, "3 drops of blood I've shed for thee, 3 little babes I've born for thee. White Bear Whittington, turn to me." But the old lady had done give him a sleepy dram, and he would not wake. And then the girl gave the woman her gold hickory nut so she could sleep with him the next night. But the same thing happened, and he slept on. And finally she gave the woman her gold walnut. This was all she had. And this evening her husband spit out the sleepy dram. So when the girl said, "3 drops of blood I've shed for thee, 3 babes I've born for thee, White Bear Whittington, turn to me," he done so. And when she said his name, he waked up and he knowed her. The spell was finally broke, and they walked back over the mountains together and got their 3 children and went on home, and White Bear Whittington was never a bear again. Oh, I think this is the bestest story I ever heard. By the time the sisters had quit telling it, it was real late. Everybody was sleeping except me and Sylvanie. So we helped the sisters get their bonnets, and we went out and closed the door behind us and stood barefoot in the snow. It was not cold at all. And we watched the lady sisters skitter like water bugs across the snow till they was lost in the shadows of trees. Sylvanie and me stood with our arms around each other's waists, looking out at the snow, shining back at the moon. And the sisters disappeared. But when I was straining to see them, I seed something else, and I will swear it, you could see in that moonlight as plain as day. And what I seed was White Bear Whittington walking into the dark trees and them 3 drops of blood on his back. I grabbed Sylvanie. I said, "Sylvanie, did you see him?" And she said, "Who?" But I seed him myself. I tell you, I seed his white shirt and fine gold hair all shining. White Bear Whittington. I seed him as plain as day.
Saw an old friend the other day in San Francisco beside the bay. Took me back to only yesterday. The years somehow let slip away. We laughed and talked about the days gone by, brushed a tear away with a sigh. Promised not to let it be so long, like the old refrain from an old, old song. Remember old friends we meet along the way. The gifts they've given stay with us every day. Looking back makes me wonder where we're going, how long we'll stay. I know the road brings rain and thunder, but for the journey, what will we pay? I often think the times get crazier as this old world goes round and round. Just the memory makes it easier as the highway goes up and down. Remember old friends we meet along the way. The gifts they've given stay with us every day.
I may be old, but I'm not dead. Perhaps you're surprised to hear this, to learn that people such as myself are still capable of original ideas and intense feelings. Passionate love affairs, for example, are not uncommon here. Pacemakers cannot regulate the strange, unbridled yearnings of the heart. This knowledge is probably upsetting to you, as it is upsetting to my sons, who do not want to hear, for instance, about my relationship with Dr. Solomon Marks, the historian. My son Will said, "Come on, Mama, can't you maintain a little dignity here?" "Dignity," says Will, who runs a chain of miniature golf courses. "I have had enough dignity to last me for the rest of my life, thank you," I told him. "I have always done exactly what I was supposed to do, and now I intend to do what I want. Besides, Dr. Solomon Marks is the joy of my life. This remained true even when my second surgery was less than successful, obliging me to take to this chair. It remained true until Solomon's most recent stroke caused his thoughts to become disordered, so he cannot always remember the words for things. A survivor himself, Solomon is an expert on the Holocaust. He has numbers tattooed on his arm. He used to travel the world speaking about the Holocaust. Now he can't remember the name of it. "Well, I think it's a blessing," said one of his nurses. "The Holocaust was just awful." "It is not a blessing, you ignorant bitch," I told her. "It is the end. Our memories are all we've got." I put myself in reverse and sped away before she could reply. I am sure she wrote something in her ever-present notebook. Unmanageable or inappropriate, some of the words they use around here. The words that Solomon cannot recall are always nouns. He said to me one day recently, "My dear, what did you say your name was?" He knew it, deep in his heart's core. Alice Scully. Ah, Alice Scully. "And what is it that we used to do together, Alice Scully, which brought me such intense, so big, it was the greatest, sex. You loved it." Oh, yes, it was sex indeed. I have devised a game to help Solomon remember nouns. It works like this. Whenever they bring him out, I go over to him and clasp my hands together as if I were hiding something in them. If you can guess what I've got here, I'll give you a kiss. He will squint in concentration, fishing for a noun. If he gets one, I give him a kiss. Some days are better than others. Well, this is true for all of us, of course. We can't be expected to remember all we know. In my life, I was a teacher, and a good one. I taught English for 30 years at Sandy Point, Virginia, where I lived with my husband, Harold Scully, and brought up 4 sons, 3 of them Harolds. Harold owned and ran the Trent Riverside Pharmacy until the day he dropped dead counting out antibiotic capsules. His mouth and his eyes were wide open, as if whatever he found on the other side surprised him mightily. I was sorry to see this, as Harold was not a man who liked surprises. I taught school because I wanted to. It was the only way in those days that a woman could get out of the house without being considered odd. I loved teaching. I loved to diagram sentences on the blackboard, precisely separating the subject from the predicate with a vertical line, the linking verb from the predicate adjective with a slanted line. I loved geography, tracing roads and rivers. I loved to trace the route of the Pony Express, the Underground Railroad. I told them the story of that bumbling fool Zebulon Pike, who set out to find the source of the Mississippi River and ended up instead at the glorious peak they named for him, Pike's Peak. I taught my students these things. The first sustained flight in a power-driven airplane was by Wilbur and Orville Wright. Wisconsin is the Badger State. You cannot sink in the Great Salt Lake. Now these facts ricochet around in my head like pinballs. I was known as a hard teacher, but a fair one. And many of my students came back in later years to tell me how much they had learned. Here at Marshwood, a total retirement community, they want us to become children again. And this is why I was so pleased when the announcement went up on the bulletin board about a month ago. Writing group to meet Wednesday, 3 p.m. Aha! For like many former English teachers, I had thought that, yes, someday I might like to write. At the appointed day and hour, I motored over to the library. I was dismayed to find Martha Louise Clapton already in charge. The idea had been hers, I learned. I should have known she's the type who likes to run everything. Martha Louise has never liked me, having had her eye on Solomon for years before I came to no avail. She inclined her frizzy blue head ever so slightly to acknowledge my entrance. As I was saying, Alice, several of us have discovered that, in fact, we've been writing for years in our journals and letters and whatnot. And so I said to myself, Martha Louise, why not form a writing group? And voila! Voila, I said. So it began. The writing group included Joy Richter, a minister's widow with a preference for poetry, Miss Eleanor Greer, who taught Shakespeare for years at a girls' school in Nashville, Frances Weinberg, whose husband lay in a coma over at the health center. Ah, a euphemism? You never leave the health center. Shirley Lassiter, who had buried 3 husbands and still thought of herself as a belle, and Sam Hofstetter, retired lawyer, deaf as a post. We agreed to meet again in the library 1 week later, and each of us should bring some writing to share with the others. I had wondered if I might suffer initially from writer's block, but in fact, I was flooded by memories. My head was full of the people and the places and myself, as I was then a headstrong girl longing to leave home and walk in the world at large. I wrote for 3 days. I wrote until I felt satisfied. I felt better than I had in years. During that week, Solomon guessed candy, ring, and Anison. He was getting better. I was not. I ignored certain symptoms in order to attend the Wednesday meeting of the writing group. Martha Louise led off. They just don't make families like they used to. And she continued with an account of growing up on a farm in Ohio, how her parents struggled to make ends meet, how the children cut out paper ornaments to trim the tree when there was no money for Christmas. We were poor, but we were happy. It was an ideal childhood. Frances Weinberg said, "Oh, Martha Louise, that was just beautiful." Too many adjectives, I thought, but I held my tongue. Joy Richter read a poem about seeing God in everything. The stuff of day was a phrase I rather liked. And then Miss Eleanor presented a sonnet comparing life to a merry-go-round. The final couplet went, "Lost children, though you're old, remember well the music and joy of life's carousel." This was not bad. I said so. Frances Weinberg read a reminiscence about her husband's return from the Second World War, and Sam Hofstetter read an account of army life somewhere in France. Shirley Lassiter was the only one whose story was not about herself. It was fiction evidently modeled upon a romance novel. It involved a voluptuous debutante who had to choose between 2 men. Both of them were rich, both of them loved her, but one had a fatal disease, and for some reason this young woman didn't know which one. Then it was my turn. I began to read the story of my childhood. I had grown up in the tiny coastal town of Waterville, Maryland, with 3 older brothers and a baby sister. My father, who was in the oyster business, killed himself when I was 6. He went out into the Chesapeake Bay in an old rowboat, chopped a hole in the bottom of it with an axe, and then shot himself in the head with a revolver. My mother, was left with 5 children to bring up and no means of support. She was forced to turn our home into a boarding house, keeping mostly teachers and salesmen passing through. I am sure Mama could have married again, but her heart was full of bitterness at the way her life had turned out, and she never forgave my father. Daddy had been a charmer, by all accounts. He carried a silver-handled cane, allowed me to play with his gold pocket watch. He took me to the harness races with him, where we cheered for the horse he owned. After his death, the boys went off to sea as soon as they could, and I was obliged to work in the kitchen and take care of Rose. As time went on, Mama withdrew from us. My great joy was Rose. I slept with her every night, played with her every day. Since Mama was indisposed, we could do whatever we wanted. We had the run of the town like boys. We'd go clamming in the bay. Once we went sailing on a trip with a cousin of ours up the Chickahominy River, but the wind failed and we got stuck there for what seemed like days and days. Rose, fussed and fumed. She was always so impatient. She hated being poor. She wanted to grow up and go away. We both developed a serious taste for distance when our older brother William and his wife took us motoring across the country. I was 16. I loved that trip, from the first stage of planning our route on the map to finally viewing the great mountains. I remember how Rose flung her arms out wide to the world as we stood on the cold wind on Pike's Peak. I believe we would have gone on driving and driving forever. But of course I had to resume my duties. William was our sweetest brother, but they're all dead now. I've outlived them all. Yet it seems like yesterday that Rose and I were little girls playing the game we loved. This memory is more vivid than any other in my life. It is late at night, summertime. Rose and I have sneaked out of the boarding house, past Mama's room, stepping tiptoe across the wide plank kitchen floor, out the door into moonlight so bright it leaves shadows. Darting from tree to tree, we cross the yard, down the sidewalk to the edge of town, where the road goes on forever through miles of peanut fields toward Baltimore. Rose and I lie down flat in the middle of the road, which still retains the heat of the day, and we let it warm us as we dream aloud of what the future holds. At different times, Rose planned to be an aviator, a doctor, a film actress living in California with an orange tree in the yard. I said I would be a missionary teacher in some far-off corner of the world. Even as I said it, I knew it would not come to pass. I was bound to stay at home, and Rose was bound to go. But we'd lie there, looking up at the sky and dreaming our dreams, and wait for the thrill of an oncoming vehicle, which we could hear and feel throughout the length of our bodies as it neared us. We would roll off the pavement into the peanut field just as the car approached, our hearts pounding. Sometimes we nearly dozed on that warm road. Once we were almost killed by a potato truck. Gradually, I took over the running of the boarding house and Mama's care. At 18, Rose ran away with a fast-talking furniture salesman who had been boarding with us. They settled finally in Ohio, had 3 children, and her life was not glamorous in the least. And we wrote to each other every week until her death of lung cancer at 39. This was as far as I'd gotten. I looked around the room. Joy Richter was ashen. Eleanor Greer was mumbling to herself. Shirley Lassiter was fluttering her fingers. And Sam Hofstetter stared at me with the oddest expression. And Frances Weinberg wept. Martha Louise said, "Alice, now just look at what you've done. Meeting adjourned." I had to miss the third meeting of the writing group because Dr. Culbertson stuck me into the health center for treatment and further tests. He then went so far as to consult with my son Robert, a doctor as well. Dr. Culbertson was of the opinion that I ought to move to the health center for better care. I called Robert immediately and gave him a piece of my mind. I came here when I had to because I did not want any of my son's wives to be stuck with me. And now I expect some common decency and respect. Even Carl, the child of my heart, says I had better listen to the doctor. Instead, I have been listening to this voice too long silent inside me, the voice of myself, as I write page after page, propped up in bed at the health center. It is Wednesday. I have skipped certain of my afternoon medications. At 2:15, I buzz Sheila, my favorite nurse's aide, and I say, "Sheila, I need for you to help me dress, dear. I have to go to a meeting. Dr. Culbertson said it would be perfectly all right." I pull a $20 bill from my purse, which I keep right beside me in bed, and hand it to her. I know it's a lot of trouble, but it's very important. I think I'll slip on the red sweater and the black wraparound skirt. That's so easy to get on. "Okay, honey," Sheila says. She gets me dressed, sets me in my chair. I put on lipstick. She hands me my purse and my notebook, and then I'm off. Oh, I feel fine now. I head for the library where the writers' group is already in progress. Miss Eleanor is reading, but she stops and looks up when I come in, and her mouth is a perfect Everyone looks at Martha Louise. "Why, Alice, we didn't expect that you would be joining us today. We heard you were in the health center." I was, but I'm out now. I ride up to the circular table, set my brake, and get out my notebook. They're all looking at me. "What is it?" "Well, Alice, last week when you were absent, we laid out some ground rules for this writing group. We are all in agreement here, Alice, that if this is to be a pleasant and meaningful club for all of us, we need to restrict our subject matter to what everyone enjoys." So, I don't get it. "We've also adopted an official name for the group. It's the Happy Memories Club." I am beginning to get it. "You mean to tell me—" "I mean to tell you that if you wish to be a part of this group, Alice Scully, you will have to calm yourself down. Keep your subject matter in check. We don't come here to be upset." They're all watching me closely now. I think they expect an outburst. "Fine. Sounds just fine to me." There is a perceptible relaxation then as Miss Eleanor resumes her reading. But I find myself unable to listen. I simply can't hear Eleanor or Joy, who reads next. "Well, is that it for today? Anybody else?" "I brought something, but I don't have copies." Everybody looks at Martha Louise. "Well, go on then." And I begin. "After Rosa's disappearance, my mother took to her bed, leaving me in charge of everything. I worked like a dog, long hours, yet I persevered. People in the town, including the minister, complimented me. The boarding house stayed full, and somehow I managed to get meals on the table, and I smiled at mealtime. But inside I was starving for love, life. Thus it is not surprising, I suppose, that I should fall for the first man who showed any interest in me. He was a school teacher who had been educated at the university in Charlottesville, a dreamy young man from one of the finest families of Virginia. He used to sit out every day after supper reading, and one day I joined him. It was a lovely June evening. The sky above us was as round and blue as a bowl. He said, "I was reading a poem about a girl with beautiful yellow hair, and then I look up, and what do I see? A real girl with beautiful yellow hair." For some reason, I started to cry, not even caring what my other boarders thought as they sat up on the porch. "Oh, come here," he said. And he took my hand and led me behind the old rose-covered boathouse, where he pulled me to him and kissed me. His name was Carl Redding Armistead. "You pretty thing." And he kissed me again. The scent of the roses was everywhere. I went that night to his room, and before the summer was out, we had lain together in every room at the boarding house. We were crazy for each other by then, and I didn't care what might happen or who knew. On Saturday evenings, Carl and I would take the skiff and row out to Sand Island, where the wild ponies were, and take off all our clothes and make love. Sometimes my back would be red and bleeding from the rough black sand and the broken shells on the beach. "Just a minute, just a minute." Martha Louise is pounding on the table and Frances Weinberg is crying. Of course, this romance did not last. Nothing that intense can be sustained. Carl and I foundered upon the prospect of the future. He had to go on to that world which awaited him. I could not leave Mama. Our final parting was bitter. We were exhausted by the force of what had passed between us. He did not even look back as he sped away in his red sports car, nor did I cry. Nor did I ever tell him about the existence of Carl, my son, whom I bore out of wedlock 8 months later, telling no one who the father was. Those were hard days. I was ostracized by the very people who had praised me. I wore myself down to a frazzle taking care of Mama and the baby at the same time. One night I was so tired I felt that I would actually die. Yet little Carl would not stop crying. Nothing would quiet him, not rocking, not the breast, not walking the room. I remember looking out my window at the quiet town where everyone slept, everyone on this earth, I felt, except for me. I held Carl out at arm's length and looked at him good in the streetlight. I had an awful urge to throw him out the window. "That is enough!" Martha Louise is standing, but it is Miss Eleanor who speaks. "I cannot believe that out of your entire life, Alice Scully, this is all you can find to write about. What of your long marriage to Mr. Scully? What of your 7 grandchildren?" Of course, I loved Harold Scully. I love my grandchildren. I love Solomon, too. I love them all. Miss Eleanor is like my sons, too terrified to admit to herself how many people we can love, how various we are. She does not want to hear it any more than you do. You all want us to never change, never change. I did not throw my baby out the window. My mother finally died, and I sold the boarding house when I was able finally at last to go to school. Out of the corner of my eye, I see Dr. Culbertson appear at the library door. Martha Louise says, "I simply cannot believe that a former English teacher," well, this strikes me as very funny. My mind is filled with enormous sentences as I back up my chair and then start forward, out the other door and outside into the sweet spring day where the sunshine falls on my face as it did in those days on the beach. My whole body hot and aching and sticky with sweat and salt and blood, the wild ponies paying us no mind as they ate the tall grass. Sometimes we could reach out and touch them. Their coats were rough and shaggy and full of burrs. I remember everything. As I cruise forward on the sidewalk, I turn right at the corner instead of left to the health center. A former English teacher. These sidewalks are like diagrams, parallel lines and dividers. The semicolon, I used to say, must separate items of equal rank. Do not write, if I had really loved Carl Armistead, semicolon, I would have left with him despite all obstacles. Do not write, I still feel his touch, semicolon, which has thrilled me throughout my life. I turn at the top of the hill and motor toward the residence center, hoping to see Solomon. The sun is in my eyes. Do not link sentences with only a comma. Do not write, I want to see Solomon again, comma, he has meant so much to me. To correct this problem, subordinate one of the parts. I want to see Solomon because he has meant so much to me. Because he has meant so much to me. Fragments all. I push the button to open the door into the residence center, and sure enough, they've brought him out. They've wheeled him in front of the television, which he hates. I cruise over. Solomon? But first he doesn't respond. Solomon! And I bump his wheelchair. A little light comes into his eyes. Solomon, I'll give you a kiss if you can guess what I have in my hand. Now, Mrs. Scully, his nurse starts. Come on, what have I got in here? An elephant, Solomon finally says. Close enough. And I lean right over to kiss his sweet old cheek. Mrs. Scully, his nurse starts again, but I'm gone. I am history. I am out the front door and up the long drive to the highway. It all connects. Everything connects. The sun is bright. The dogwood is blooming. The state flower of Virginia is the dogwood. I can still see my own little sons as they sail their own little boats in a tidal pool on the Chesapeake Bay. The first historic words ever transmitted by telegraph came to Maryland, "What hath God wrought?" The sun is still shining. It glares off the snow on Pikes Peak. It gleams through the milky blue glass of the old apothecary jar in the window of Harold Scully's shop. It warms the asphalt on that road where Rose and I lie waiting, waiting, waiting.
Lately word keeps coming back to me. There are a few I will no longer see. Faces will we see no more along the road. There'll be a few less hands to hold. But for the ones whose journey's ended, though it started so much the same, in the hearts of those befriended burns a candle with a silver flame. Remember old friends we meet along the way. The gifts they've given stay with us every day. Remember old friends we meet along the way. The gifts they've given stay with us